your flesh and blood.
Welcome to Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. And welcome to Tell Me Your Story. We have a special guest here on the program today, once again, all the way from the East Coast, well, not quite the East Coast, Connecticut to be exact, Diane Parrish. She's the author of a wonderful book. I love the title, Diane. It is called Something Better, and we'll talk about what you mean by that. Welcome here to Tell Me Your Story. Thank you for taking time to be with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
I tell you, I love book titles. Mine was chosen, of course. My book is called The Choices, 5 Steps for Life. And it's something that I thought about for a long time. And what really brought it about for me was, of course, the events that were happening in my life. Mm-hmm. Your book, Something Better, I like that. And when we talk about better, we're trying to make the world a better place for everyone. And it is possible. We're not talking about a utopia here. What do you mean by better?
What do I mean by better in the book?
Mm-hmm.
The book, the title refers to a series of choices that each of the characters in the book has to make along the way. And they're confronted with some options, and they have to decide, is choice A better or choice B better? And as the story unfolds, some make choices that are a little questionable that some readers might find is definitely not the better, and others make choices that seem to me to be pretty clearly the better. But I wrote the book so that readers could be involved in the story and decide as it unfolds what they think is the right thing to do and what they might have done in that situation. But that's the way I like to read. I don't like in terms of fiction. In terms of nonfiction, yes, spoon feed it to me, give it to me, tell me what to do. But in terms of fiction, I like to interpret, and I like things that are open-ended and slightly ambiguous so that my own brain gets involved with the process. And that's what I wanted to do for the readers.
Well, I know that for every person, better means something a little different because and there are over 8 billion different perspectives on what is better. Yeah. When you're talking about something better, there is a natural, biological, shall we say, Mother Nature aspect of evolution that's going on. I mean, that is happening. You can argue all you want from your philosophy, your beliefs, but the reality is it is. That's why we go to school, right? We go to school to evolve intellectually. Mm-hmm. And in some instances, mentally, and so forth. We're trying to, so to speak, increase our database, but not just for the purposes of increasing it. I mean, my goodness, I remember when computers first came out, and I used to build them. And I thought that a 512 megabyte hard drive was huge.
We all did, right?
Yeah, that was nothing compared to where we are going now.
Hmm.
And one of these days, I have a funny feeling that when we start talking about just say storage space in the cloud, I think it will actually literally be there'll be no physical device or storage space like a hard drive or what have. I mean, we'll just be able to put it up there. We'll know where it is because we've named it. We've maybe password protected or whatever. Because people like Tesla found out that there is energy that's all around us. It's all around us. So like the waves, radio and television, and on and on and on. That we're walking through and that are going through us all the time, aren't they?
Yeah. So you're envisioning a world where there are no servers. Literally, our data is stored on something similar to a wave, like an electromagnetic wave or something like that.
I would say that one day that may happen, that
Oh,
we won't
wow.
need a physical space to put it. And I have to say that I have to wonder companies like YouTube and Netflix and alike, are they constantly just plugging in new terabyte hard drives, every second of every day of every year? Because just like we were talking before we started about books, uh, there are all kinds of visual presentations that are being created constantly. I mean, I'm uploading, for example, this program, this broadcast podcast videocast will be uploaded to my YouTube channel when I'm done. And apparently, there's no limit to what I can upload. Well, at least I don't think there is. There might be, but I haven't found the fine print yet.
Okay.
So it's like more and more is being created. Let's get into the meat, shall we say, of something better. Now, this is a work of fiction, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And give us a little synopsis. Let's not give anything away here because we want people to go to your website, which, by the way, is dianeparrish.com, correct?
Yes, that's right.
All right, we'll be linked to that as well. Give us a little synopsis of something better.
Okay. The synopsis is there's a betrayal in a marriage. Appears to be a solid marriage. The betrayal is somewhat unusual and a little controversial. I won't explain exactly what it is. But as a result of the betrayal, the main characters, the husband, the wife, and the other woman, all need to confront their degree of responsibility, the amount of forgiveness they need to extend, and the amount of forgiveness that they can allow themselves to accept. Because, of course, accepting forgiveness means acknowledging wrong. And that's very hard for us as humans to do, I think, for us to realize, gee, I actually did mess this up. This actually is my fault. This is a place where I went wrong. But until we can do that, we can't accept forgiveness. And until we accept forgiveness, we really are stuck. We can't move forward.
I Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to wonder if maybe I was a little naive in a philosophy that I held on to for a while. And this was during my first marriage.
I had one of those too, so it happens.
Yeah, it does. But that uh, I used to think that regardless of whatever the circumstances were, you could work through anything to
Mhm.
make it work. You would not just give up and sign the papers and move on with the next relationship.
Mhm.
And then, of course, after 15 years, some circumstances developed to where I found myself sitting there going, oh, maybe that might be in general a great rule to follow. It might be something that could work. However, when you get to specific instances, not so much. And I do have to say that I really tried to do it amicably and so forth. I loved my divorce attorney's slogan, and the real interesting irony was my former wife had a male attorney. I had a female attorney whose slogan was reasonable solutions for reasonable people.
Oh, that's nice.
Unfortunately, her attorney was not Reasonable.
He had not read that saying.
Had not read that one, no. But hey, it was what it was. And so now in my, and I have to say that in my present relationship, in my present marriage, um, I stated when we first got together, and then of course after we had our first wedding, which was back in 2002, and it was ceremonial. It wasn't a legal one. We did make it legal in June 30th of 2024.
Oh,
Uh,
congratulations.
but thank you. But I made the commitment to myself more than to her per se that I was never going to go through that again after what I'd been through,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
and that I was going to do everything in my power, in my power, to make it work.
Hmm.
Now, I say that now, but I don't know what's going to happen in a year or 5 years or 10 years. I don't know how much longer either of us has to live. I'm 65. She's in her mid 70s. Um, but when it comes to relationships, when you talk about, you said you used the word betrayal. For a lot of people, that's unforgivable. You cannot forgive someone who has betrayed you, has done that. I've been in this business a long time in broadcasting, 45 plus years. I've had people who've done that to me. It wasn't, I didn't view it as such a big deal
Hmm.
because it's like, but that's on them. Yeah, short term, that hurt me maybe, but that's on them. I don't take responsibility for their actions. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. Am I sitting in a position where I'm being awfully naive and idealistic, or am I trying to, I don't know, maybe try to keep the peace? I don't like the conflict. I don't like the drama, those kinds of things.
Say, I've done a lot of reading about forgiveness, and in fact, I took a course on forgiveness.
Hmm.
And one of the things I learned is that there's a difference between forgiveness and maintaining a relationship of trust with a person. We basically forgive for ourselves. If we hold on to a grudge and we keep a lot of anger inside, that eats us up. I think it was Annie Lamott who said something like, not forgiving is like taking rat poison and waiting for the rat to die. It's true. It destroys the person who can't forgive. The other person may not even know you're ever thinking about them. So we have to figure out a way to forgive so we free ourselves. But that doesn't mean you have to be, I wouldn't say foolish, but it doesn't mean you have to agree to continue to have a relationship with this person. If the trust is broken and you realize that the person who's hurt you or has broken your trust that's just how they are, they're not going to change. You don't have to welcome them back in your life. You don't have to maintain the relationship. You can let that go. But
Mhm.
when you let that go, you have to you have to extend forgiveness to free yourself from the bondage of a grudge, is what I would say.
Mm. And sometimes we inflict, as individuals, we inflict that bondage on ourselves because we refuse to let go. And you use the word forgiveness. We use, we talk about that a lot too here on the program, in conjunction more so with, like, for example, gratitude, appreciation, and so on and so forth. Is that sort of the message that you're wanting to get across to folks, that this world, this life, as I describe it, we're here for less than a puff of smoke, folks.
Yeah, yeah.
My opinion, we're here for less than a puff of smoke. Uh, Life is too short to do that, because haven't we seen and scientifically proven what you just spoke of, is that when we hold on to these kinds of things, it hurts us more than it hurts anybody else. There's a great line from The Big Bang Theory years ago where Sheldon was upset, of course, had his arch nemesis, Will Wheaton. And Will Wheaton had the greatest line in the show. He says, "Yeah, but I'm living rent free right up here." And he pointed to Sheldon's head.
Great line, yes.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about that. And then let's get into how we can begin the process of bringing about a forgiveness, not necessarily forgive you, but maybe, as I came up with one phrase, I I forgive myself for allowing myself to be dragged into this quagmire.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely a part of forgiveness. Absolutely. Forgiveness comes in so many different, well, flavors, so many different facets. I think we have to forgive ourselves. Absolutely. We have to forgive ourselves for allowing ourselves to be hurt. We have to forgive ourselves for being in this situation where we were taken advantage of or whatever happened to us. We have to forgive the other person who hurt us, who broke our trust, whatever the situation is. And in my book, I wanted to look at that whole process from the point of view of three different characters. The wife in the book is a believer, so she draws her forgiveness from her faith. The husband in the book is not necessarily a believer, but he's a good, tries very, very hard to be a good person. He believes he is a good person. He tries to do things to help other people. He tries to live a moral life.
Mm.
And the other younger woman in the book is, well, frankly, she's so uh, rocked by the grief of losing her parents that she's pretty adrift at this point in the story. And she's still sorting out where she's going to land because grief, which is another um, motif of the book, is completely disorienting. We actually become someone other than ourselves when we go through the process of grief. And so I really wanted to take a look at it and extend forgiveness to these flawed people as
Mhm.
they're trying to sort their way through it. And that was the point of my book, just to understand it's complicated, it's not always easy, and it can take time. I really have a pet peeve about what I call the Hallmark card moment when you're watching a movie or you're reading a book and people who've been at each other or done terrible things to each other, and they just suddenly look at each other and say, I forgive you. And all is well, and it's over, and they never look back and they're never hurt again. Well, it doesn't happen like that. You have to forgive sometimes repeatedly. I mean, I speak from personal experience and other people who've talked to me since the books come out, where you make a decision, yes, I'm done with this. I forgive you. I'm not going to let this hurt me anymore. And you move on. And then out of the blue later, you're right back where you started. You're back to being angry and upset and eating that poison again. So I think part of the forgiveness is forgiving ourselves that we don't do it instantaneously, that it's not so easy as we would like for it to be.
Mm. That's a very interesting point. I I won't go into detail with this, but I have a situation with an individual that I worked with for like 8 or 9 years. And along the way, we developed a really fine friendship. At least I thought we had.
Uh-huh.
Now we had this personal nonverbal agreement about that came from the other person's side, where, oh, you know what, I'm gonna pay you X number of dollars an hour for the extra work that you do for my program, which of course is on the radio station. And I said, well, you don't have to do that, but I appreciate it. I really do. He said, no, I want to. Okay. So 7, 8, 9 years goes by, and then all of a sudden, at the end of 2023, things change and they shift, and this person just decides, I'm out of here. I'm done. And what hurts more, even today, even to this day, what hurts more isn't the fact that I'm not going to see the 4 or 5 digit uh, um, financial gain. What
Oh,
hurts more is the loss of the friendship.
oh yes, of course. Yes.
Now, if I never see the money, even if I did see the money, I still would mourn and grieve the loss of that friendship.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's very, very painful. I had an interesting experience not too long ago. I was a lawyer and I practiced law in the early 80s. At the time I was hired, I was only the third woman the law firm had ever hired. So they didn't know what to do with us. We were just, creatures from another planet as far as the law firm was concerned. And there were things that happened then that would never happen now. But it was what it was. And I eventually left the practice of law and I stopped thinking about the way things were back then. But last summer, my husband and I had dinner with one of the lawyers I had worked with back in the day. This was a long time ago. And we're sitting at dinner, drinks come, we just barely sat down, and he said, you know, I've been thinking a lot about this for many years. We did not treat you, I could cry right now. We did not treat you right. We did not treat any of the women right. We were not fair to you. And that was such a surprise that I had such an emotional reaction to that, because I thought I had moved well past it. I thought I had forgiven everybody and realized that, oh, it was a different time, it was a different place. I had stopped thinking about it. But when he was generous enough to apologize, I realized, oh no, there's still a little something in there that hurts from this. But funnily enough, although he was apologizing on behalf of the whole law firm, not just himself, when he said that, it was gone. It was, I was just so moved that he was willing to apologize like that, and that he perceived something that I thought no one else had perceived.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've actually been accused of being rather naive and idealistic in my views when, like, if the conversation delves into the political realm, and this covers the last 45 or 50 years that I've been conscious of the political arena, and I would talk about how words have power. And I would say, well, yeah, here's the example. The one example back when I was living in Arizona, we had a governor a gentleman who was running for the gubernatorial office. And he said some things about his opponent of the same party in order for him to win the nomination and move on and so forth, to win. He became governor. And I said, you don't understand, words have power. His intent in using those words was to get that office. And so he had a motive and so forth. Oh, Richard, you're being naive. It's just politics. To which I responded, no, it isn't just politics. It shows our character. It shows who we really are and what I can expect from you down the road, as long as you continue to speak this way. And we have that same issue today across the board. I'm not going into any specifics, but across the board, we have this same issue that we're dealing with when it comes to people who are in the public eye, whether it's politics, it could be business, it could be finance, it could be religion, it could be education, whatever the area. Can we talk a little bit about that in terms of how we can trust people? I take people at their word. When you say something to me, I believe you're telling me the truth. When my first wife said certain things to me, and then I said certain things to her, and again, we're not talking about derogatory, what have you. I meant what I said, and I took her at her word that she meant what she said. So how do we grapple with that? How do we make peace with that aspect of, yeah, but you said, and then they do something totally different that shakes your faith in them, shakes your faith in humanity, and so forth.
I think it's really difficult. I mean, I think across the board, as you say, I think we're living in a time right now that is so full of dishonesty and words that don't mean what they should mean. And it's very difficult. I find that I wouldn't say I'm more cynical, because cynical is a really negative thing to be, but I am more skeptical now than I've ever been, not just with politicians, but I feel a little bit older, wiser, that I don't really necessarily take what people say at face value anymore. And I think that's a loss. I think it definitely hampers communication, and it's an impediment to building relationships. If when you're listening to someone, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, well, do you mean that? Is that sincere? Are you just saying that for the moment? Are you saying that to get elected, in the example of the politician? Are you saying that to get my business, in the example of a commercial transaction? And I myself am different now. I do listen with more reserve, I would say, which
Mhm.
isn't always terrible unless it crosses over into a place of cynicism where you just don't believe anything anybody's saying. Then how do you sustain relationships? How do you sustain friendships if you doubt the veracity of everybody else's conversation?
Yeah.
Well, I honestly feel like right now, this moment in time is a very tricky moment for exactly what you bring up. And I don't have an easy answer. I think you have to, for me, I have to evaluate each speaker, each situation, and I'm constantly weighing what they're saying based on what I know about them in the past, based
Yeah.
on what other people is. And I do, yeah, I had an opportunity, I won't go into the details either. I had an opportunity this weekend to wade into a situation where they were claiming they wanted me to be the voice of reason, but I knew the players and I knew the issue and I knew they didn't really want a voice of reason. They wanted somebody else to get dragged into the middle of this thing. And I had to say,
Mm.
I don't think anything I could bring to this party would be helpful, and just, backed away. But is that good or bad? I don't know.
Yeah. There's a wonderful phrase, of course. It says, pick your fights, pick your battles.
Yes.
And sometimes it is I think the phrase is, it's the better part of valor, so to speak.
Mm.
Sometimes to just walk away and say, no, I'm not going to play. That's not the
Yeah.
game I want to play. And the one game that I refuse to play, and yet a lot of people out there want to play the game called victimhood.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
somebody else's fault that
Yes.
I'm in the situation I'm in. It's somebody else's fault. It's my former wife's fault. So I don't like calling her my ex. My former wife's fault that we got divorced, or it's her parents' fault for even having her, or
Yeah.
or
Keep going back.
it's her grandfather's fault for escaping the Bolshevik Revolution the night
There you
before
go.
it took
That's
place.
him. He's the guy.
How much further back shall I go? It's Adam's fault that he ate the apple.
Eve. Doesn't always go back to Eve, though.
Oh my goodness, Eve! By the way, we just acquired three new kittens about a month or so ago, and my wife named one of them Lilith.
Oh boy,
And
that's a bold choice.
oh yeah, oh, and she actually thought, because it was two boys and a girl, they were siblings, and she says, oh, maybe we should have named Dorian for Dorian Gray. We should have
Uh-huh.
named him, maybe we should have named him Adam. I says, no, no,
Oh,
no, you're not going to change it now. But it's just it's funny how I went through for a very short time when I was 19. I went through a phase of victimhood. I was out of high. I graduated high school. I was taking, you might call it a 6 month sabbatical.
okay. Let's call it that.
We'll call it that. And my mom was suggesting. My mom actually made this suggestion. Well, why don't you go work for one of the religious radio stations? To which I responded, of course, now, I don't want them shoving their beliefs down my throat. But I couldn't drive because I was legally blind, and I said, here was the victimhood. The state's the one that labeled me blind, so it's on them. So they should be paying
Oh,
me. Now that only lasted a very short time. And once I realized that if I stayed in that position, I would stay in that. I'd
oh.
probably still be living with my mother today.
Mhm. Yes. Mm-hmm. It,
So victimhood seems to be very prevalent in our society. And I thought we got through it in the 80s and then move on to deal with codependency. Then we moved on to deal with interdependency. And I'm thinking, oh, wonderful. We're growing, we're evolving, we're raising our consciousness. And then 10 or 12 years ago, bammo, we got hit with it again. And it became the cry of the land.
yes, it did. It definitely did. I was, so I was before we got on this call, I was actually at a funeral this morning of
Oh,
an older gentleman. He's a friend. He's, not a family member, but he was a dear man. He came from, his father was an immigrant from Russia. And this family came with nothing but a work ethic and a desire to be free. They were
mhm.
great. Once they got here, they became great American patriots. And I listened to the story of his background, which I didn't really know. And I found myself thinking, what a rare bird that is now. It feels, I know that's happening. I know that is still happening all over the world, but you don't hear as many of those stories anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and your story about your eyes, actually, it reminds me of my story about my own father. My father was a cattle farmer, grew up on a cattle farm.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was a fairly newly married farmer with a 6-month-old baby, me, he got polio.
Mm.
And that was he by good doctors, grace, hard work. He got to the point where he was walking again with a limp, but it made it impossible for him to be a farmer. And he ended up having to go into other fields of work. But never, ever over the course of his life did I ever hear him say anything but how grateful he was that he survived that experience, that he was all he had to deal with was a limp. He wasn't, in a wheelchair or in some other way really seriously impaired. And having the door on farming slammed in his face, he viewed as the best thing that ever happened to him. And he never embraced the role of victimhood. Is that a generational thing, do you think?
It might be. I want to share something that um, was shared with me by one of my childhood next door neighbor friends. His brother was my age, and he and I, this other brother, the younger brother, and I connected via Facebook, and then we started texting, and we'd talk on the phone and so forth. And he apparently shared, oh, hey, I reconnected with Richard. I remember our neighbors next door. And the real irony was, and I didn't know at the time the divide there was between Catholics and Mormons, but we lived peacefully beside each other, right next door to each other. And his older brother says, oh, really? Well, hey, the next time you talk to him, if you have a way of letting Richard know, this is what he wrote, tell him that by growing up with him, I never have looked at people with a disability as being disabled. Anybody who had a vision challenge like him, but would still play chess and football and build forts in the oleanders. My father had a bunch of oleanders in our backyard. The oleander bushes and dig underground forts shows that having a disability is no reason to not do what you want to do. Thank you.
Oh,
And
that's wonderful.
and that's from him, not from me, folks. And I was really touched by that because I didn't think anything of it at the time as we were growing up. I mean, we had one of their friends. Her name was Karen, and had nothing to do with the current definition of Karen today. We played this game where she was, so to speak, but in a non-sexual way, a dominatrix. I mean, she was mean, and she would chase us around the neighborhood. Okay, and we're talking around the neighborhood after sunset, and it was just the game that we played.
Mhm.
And again, I never even thought anything of it. I mean, we played kickball in the front yard of our house, to my father's consternation, because he had this one tree that was right by home base. And he didn't really like us playing there. But we didn't have fences around the front yards like you do today.
Yeah.
We did have some palm trees in the front. You know how sometimes you get the two, side by side. Um, we had such a blast. I tell you, I wish I could share and give to the young people of today that kind of life as a kid, to be a kid for as long as you can.
Yeah, yeah. So do you think the reason that you never considered your sight challenges a disability was because of how your parents raised you? Do you think it was something innate in you?
I think it was innate in me more than my parents, because when I was in my 20s and we were sitting around the dining room table at their townhouse talking about life in school, and I had to deal with bullies. My mother said to me, she says, Richard, I wish we could have protected you.
Oh,
Now, on the one hand, I thought, well, I appreciate the sentiment. Thank you. But on the other hand, I'm thinking, and if you had even tried, it would have made things even worse, kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
But I bicycled to and from the school, both grade school and high
Oh,
school.
goodness. Would you tell me how that worked? How did that work?
Well, I had what's called 2200 vision in my right eye, which means I can see at 20 feet what you can see at 200. All right. So I
Mhm.
could see well enough to get around the city. I'm not kidding you. When I was in high school delivering newspapers on a bicycle, I would bicycle. If you know anything about the layout of metropolitan Phoenix, there's to the east is Scottsdale, to the west is Glendale, and then there's Tempe, Mesa, Chandler, and the list goes on of all of these different subdivisions. And I was bicycling uh, all the way across. We had a Central Avenue was zero, and to the east it was streets and places and that kind of thing. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. To the west it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 avenues and lanes and that kind of thing. I was going out to 60 and 70 blocks from zero, both directions, and
Oh
then
my
north and
God.
south. So I was all over the place. All right.
Wow.
I think it was just, and I will tell you that when I got into this business in '79, at the age of 19, I developed this philosophy that what I had was a perceived limitation.
Oh, that's interesting.
It was only a limitation if I chose it to be. And I remember first getting into broadcasting in August and September of '79. And I was a little scared because we're talking about queuing up records, black records with these very thin little pieces of flat place between the songs, that kind of stuff, and on and on and on.
Yeah, yeah.
And when I went to work for a religious station in the '80s and early '90s, I learned how to cue a record up within 5 to 10 seconds from removing it from the record rack. I got so proficient at it.
I couldn't do that.
Oh, and it's just, and then of course we would edit audio tape. We would splice reel to reel, and we're using a China marker, a razor blade, and and a splicing block, which I still have all three of those. Anyway, I think that when it comes to relationships, as you talk about in your book, something better, we sometimes we see. I mean, I got hit a couple of times during my divorce with the feeling. I mean, I was a basket case for the month of May. I got served on May 1st, which I joked about that day, saying, "Oh, this gives a whole new meaning to the phrase Mayday." Um, but
Yeah.
I was an emotional basket case because I thought, "Oh my God, I have done something horrible." And on and on and on. And it wasn't until June, and I got out of that I said, "Wait a minute. Yes, I'm responsible, and so is she.
Yes.
We share responsibility here."
Mm-hmm.
Is there an aspect of this story between David, and Ruth,
Yeah.
where one of them eventually begins to realize, "Oh, um, I'm not alone in this situation.
You're,
I contributed to this situation."
yeah, in fact, it's funny. It's very easy to do the stereotypical thing and blame David, blame the guy.
Hmm.
He's the one who was unfaithful. He's the one who wrecked everything. And what I wanted to show in the book is that's not true. First of all, he's just human. He made a mistake, like everybody makes a mistake. He's not a monster. He's not a demon. He's a human being, flawed. And the problems in their marriage, which developed because Ruth, again, she's human, she's lovely, with the best of intentions, did what the people at her law firm wanted her to do in terms of advancing her own career and advancing the law firm's prospects by going to work 3,000 miles away from where her husband lived.
Mm.
And so, yes, she's not the one who had the affair, but she also created circumstances where that was more likely to happen. And in one scene, I actually have her ruminating and thinking, did I do everything I could? Did I stay in touch the way I should have? Did I go home the way I should have? Did I was I all in? And she realized she wasn't all in. So I mean, if you actually read the book, now there's some spoilers in there, but if you actually read the book, it's clear I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not letting anybody off the hook.
Mhm.
This situation happened because everybody involved was a flawed human being who made a critical mistake at a critical moment that had bad ramifications for everyone involved. But they're not irredeemable either. They're not hopelessly lost in their mistakes and their sins and the mess they made, or however you want to describe it. They're not done for. They have to pick themselves up from out of this morass and figure out a way forward. That's not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of work and it might take a lot of time. But again, I have a lot of empathy for them. They're flawed humans trying to do the best they can.
That's interesting because maybe, I don't know, a year or so, 18 months before our divorce process began, her best friend um, thought it would be a good idea for me to go to therapy.
Well, that's
Initially,
interesting. Okay. All right. I'm listening.
yeah. And I thought, okay. I mean, what's it going to hurt? I mean, I've been through therapy before. I've been through personal growth programs before. The same kind of thing, in my opinion. I thought, okay, sure. And I went through 4 sessions. And in the fourth session I was asked, and this was a female therapist too, by the way. I was asked to list all of my friends. Strangely enough, most of the names that came out of my mouth were female. Just so happens. I don't know that had anything to do with the fact that I had 4 sisters and only one brother, but she thought that was a little strange. And then as I'm sharing my life, as I'll be honest with you, I do on this program, she says, well, we're going to have to deal with some of your character flaws coming from a therapist.
Oh dear. Well,
And
there's
it,
another maid right there.
and at this point, I said, okay, we're done. And I never paid her because if that is the perspective, and again, I know a therapist is not a yes person, but they're also not a no person.
And they're not supposed to be judges.
Exactly. So I just thought that was weird. But anyway, I'm wondering what your thoughts are especially in regards to therapy. I consider this program for in as far as this program is concerned, over 17 years of therapy. But I've been interviewing since 1980. So, that's a long time to be in therapy. But you know what? I don't have a problem with it any more than Woody Allen had a problem with it. What are your thoughts in regards to either professional support and assistance and creating a network of people, friends, maybe even family members that you can honestly talk to who will try not to be judgmental, but will also call you on your stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think it's essential. And I think it probably depends on the person, which is more effective. I have some friends who are therapists. I wouldn't see them professionally because they're friends, but I know they're wonderful therapists. They would never say, we need to work on your character flaws, or boy, are you a mess, or anything like that. I mean, they would be terrific. I have no doubt. I went to a therapist after my divorce many, many years ago. It was not a successful experience, I will say. So that did not work for me. But now I do have a network. I'm so lucky. I have a network of friends of many, many years, men and women. So is that weird? I don't know. I don't think so. But I could either call and say, hey, I'm trying to sort through something. Will you help me figure out what's the best thing to do in this situation, or whatever. And we would talk about a specific thing. No problem. I know I have friends I could do that with. But also the network in general just sort of supports you and is there. If you are in a relationship with a lot of people, you see them for coffee, or you play tennis with them, or you go to the movies and have dinner, whatever it is, you really know each other, then you can feel confident to share what's on your mind and what's on your heart. And, I have family members who probably would be the first ones to say, I don't I think you're cutting yourself too much slack, or I think maybe you're not headed in the right direction here, or else ask the questions that lead. The best is, right, if they ask questions that lead you to see where maybe you might not be headed in the right direction. As long as you feel supported and understood. Isn't being understood so important and kind of a rare thing, to feel that somebody really understands you, really gets you?
There is a beautiful phrase. I've actually used it with my present wife to remind her, I hear you and I see you.
Yeah, yeah, that's great.
And when you genuinely share that with someone, it can really go a long way to let them know that they are not alone. I, uh, I know there are a lot of people who feel that way. They feel they're all alone, that
Yeah.
nobody is going through what they're going through. And the truth of the matter is that is true. Nobody is going through what you are going through. However, I mean, we all have the same emotions. It's just the intensity, right? So
Mhm,
from that standpoint alone, you're not alone.
mhm. And do you think, I don't know if you would agree with this, but I do think that the world of online communication, especially after so much time shut in our houses in the pandemic,
Mhm.
I don't think that is engendering deep relationships. I think it's easy to go online and find a group of people who tend to agree with you, whether it's over politics or, some other thing,
Mhm.
and close yourself in that world of virtual reality. And wow, what a loss. What a loss not to be with human beings in the same room at the same time. But it's easy. It's very easy to just live that way. I think it takes effort to, you know, put on the snow boots, warm up the car, get out of the driveway. But very important to do that.
It is. It really is. And it's one of the things that I'm somewhat saddened by with everything that's happened over the last 4 or 5 years, and that is the fact that uh, I would love to have in person, in studio interviews. The energy dynamic is so much different. This is the next best thing. We started with Skype and then moved on to Zoom, and I know there are other platforms and so forth. But I think you're absolutely right. And at the same time, and this is sort of what kind of I try not to let it get my goat. Uh, People sit there and they blame the internet for what ails us as a society. Oh, this generation's children are so this and so that. And it's like, well, wait a minute. You are their parents. What the heck were you doing to help continue to foster socialization?
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
true. I agree. I completely agree with you. Yeah, 100%.
back to the
It's
victimhood.
back to the victimhood of blaming someone else. I
Yeah.
mean, it's an amazing tool. I don't know what we all would have done if we hadn't had Zoom and FaceTime and the kind of things that we had during the pandemic. It's an amazing tool. I think the trick is to find, again, balance. It's all balance. Is to find the trick where it's useful, but it doesn't supplant, in person, real life.
Yeah. Diane Parrish is my guest. We are talking with her about her book, her novel, her first, as a matter of fact. It is called Something Better. And you can go to dianeparrish.com. And that is DIANEPARR, two R's, ISH.com. We will be linked to that website so people can to click on that as they're listening to or watching the podcast or video cast. And we certainly hope that you will continue to listen in and stay tuned in to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, along with Diane Parrish. Her latest work, and of course, this is actually your first novel. Is it your first book?
It's my first book, yes.
Okay, so
I've
first
done a
book, first novel. What I know that there are authors like an Og Mandino, who is one of my favorites. I actually interviewed him back in the 80s because I recorded his book, The Greatest Miracle in the World, that actually introduced me to my first wife. And then there's James Redfield. I recorded his book, The Celestine Prophecy, for my wife. It wasn't for Audible back then because Audible didn't exist. And there are people who write these books, these stories. Og was always questioning, well, was Mr. Potter real? Well, that's for you to decide. I think of the description of the old growth forests in Celestine Prophecy, and the messages that we have for one another, and so forth, and woven into these beautiful, beautiful stories. And you've done the same thing. What was your inspiration for doing it that way rather than maybe doing it nonfiction? Here's what we want to accomplish, and here are the steps.
I just have a bent towards fiction. I like storytelling. I love to read novels. The germ of this novel happened in about 2008, 2009. I was watching two similar situations. In one case, there was infidelity in a marriage. It was pretty public. It was pretty embarrassing. Somehow the people sorted it out, and they forgave each other, and they're still together, these many years later. Another situation in my own family, two people were estranged, were not speaking. One of them became terminally ill, and I called the other one and said, listen, you need to know that so-and-so is dying, and if you're ever going to come to terms with each other, this is the only time you have left. And it didn't happen. The person died with no reconciliation, and I couldn't stop thinking about, why is one possible and one not possible? And that's just, then I envisioned characters that could represent different ways it could come to pass. And they stayed with me, and they bossed me around, and they made me tell their story in the book. And so I did.
So what is your, if you will, what is your area of expertise when it comes to talking about these things? Just living life, which can make one an expert in many ways too.
Living life. And as I said, I've taken classes in forgiveness. I also did a lot of reading about grief because, as I mentioned, they all are grieving the loss of these two people. But I did a lot of research about grief. Some of it I did after I lost my parents. Others I did in connection with writing the book. So I am self-taught to a certain extent, and also I've lived many years with my eyes open and my ears open.
Yeah, well, I joked with people, the creator had a great way with math, because he gave us 2 ears and 2 eyes, but only 1 mouth. What does that tell you, ladies and gentlemen?
Very good point.
Hey, I'm 65 and I'm still learning that lesson.
Yeah, aren't we all?
Let me tell you. The book Something Better. You described the definitions thereof. Does that derive from the story itself, in that everybody in the story is looking for something better?
Partly, everybody in the story is looking for something better. And as I mentioned in passing, when they get to crossroads, they actually have to decide what's better. And the phrase something better it's not over it, I don't bang it over people's heads, but the phrase something better is threaded throughout the story. The difficulty of making the right choices and deciding what is something better. And then the last page of the book, it really comes home with the something better. So yeah, that's why I chose the title.
I like that. Do you know that when books, a lot of times, or I should rephrase that, when there are titles given to stories, a lot of times when they're dramatized in the visual arts, radio and TV and movies, pardon me, somewhere along the way, the name of the title of the program or movie is mentioned in,
Oh, yes.
yeah, somewhere
Yeah.
along the way. If you got to be quick sometimes because it's mentioned real fast and sometimes only once.
Yep.
I don't know of any programs that any movies or television programs that don't mention that unless it's just an odd, kind of thing. But to me, it's very fascinating to take a look at how these titles how people came up with the titles, and a lot of times the symbolism, like on the cover. And I'm curious about that in terms of on the cover of your book. What can you tell us about that?
I'm gonna hold it up for a second. There it is. Oh, it went away. Um, it's a house inside a snow globe, and it represents the opening scene that the couple who die in the very early pages, so I'm not spoiling anything, go to a house party in a winter snowstorm, and they describe the house as being a house inside a snow globe, protected, beautiful, isolated, but also a little bit dangerous. And then as the story unfolds, it also comes to represent the marriage of David and Ruth in a more generic sort of way. So it's a really good summary of what the story is all about. When the publisher came up with it, I was like, oh my gosh, that's perfect. I loved it.
It's funny because my wife and I have lived where we live above Santa Barbara in the mountains of, and we, of course, have a valley view as opposed to an ocean view, but that's all right. And we've been dealt with a number of fires over the 18 plus years that we've lived here. And and none of them have ever reached where we live, the property. And her feeling has been for almost the entire time that we're protected by this giant bubble, and this snow globe is a nice representation of
Yes,
that. I like that.
yes, exactly. Yes.
So and in a manner of speaking, it is possible for us to sort of protect ourselves, isn't it? I mean, in this particular area where we're talking about, obviously there's, as you mentioned, the grieving when you lose a relationship, whether it's a marriage relationship or just a friendship, that kind of thing, as I described earlier. You're talking grief. You're also talking the issues of forgiveness when you're dealing with the issues of betrayal in that regard, or for that matter, sometimes. Have you run into instances that you maybe came up in the book where there was a trust that was alleged to have been broken, but the truth was there was no trust broken. I'll give you just a really quick example of my parents, who I interviewed on this program about 10
Oh,
years ago. And one of the things that they talked about at the beginning of their marriage, maybe before, they talked about this. They said that we made an agreement with each other that if we ever heard anything negative or derogatory about the other from our so-called friends, all right, oh, he's cheating on you, she's cheating on that, don't that kind of stuff. We would not go anywhere with it without talking about it with each other.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Is
Yeah.
is there something like that woven into this particular story? And can you maybe talk a little bit about that in the context of the lessons that we're trying to learn?
Yes. Well, there are a few instances in the story where there's an opportunity to breach trust, and people decide not to. There are breaches of trust, but there are also places where the people are strong enough and make a determined decision that they're not going to breach that trust. So I like incorporating that into the story. I grew up in Kansas and I live in Connecticut, so I am an expert in buttoned up people who live in denial and don't talk about anything. So those are the people in the story. They avoid conflict. They avoid um, having difficult conversations, which makes it, of course, much harder for them to come to resolution and forgiveness. But I wanted that to be an aspect of the story too, that living this way can, in many ways, add to your challenges. And so there they are.
Yeah, it's it's really it's an interesting dynamic that we deal with. I wish that I could have really lived up to that one philosophical point that I mentioned earlier about you can work through anything and make it work no matter what. And I wish that that was possible, but circumstances change, people change.
Will change.
What about that? That is the one constant in the universe is that we all change.
Mhm.
How do you grapple with that when it comes to individuals who they want to keep things the way they are or the way they were when quite honestly I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that's a very unrealistic perspective to take when it comes to the dynamics of relationships.
Oh, it's impossible, of course. I mean, people do change constantly. My parents were married for 50 years before my mom died. And my mom people would ask, what's the secret of being married so long? What's the secret of a happy marriage? And depending on the day, they would have different answers. But one thing my mom often said was, we kept falling in love with who we were changing to be. So
Hmm.
along the way, and they did change. I mean, they were married at age 20. So they were kids and they kind of grew up together. But along the way, they each changed in very, very stark and different ways, but they just kept falling in love with a new person. And my mom made it sound like it was a choice. You know, as my dad became something different, she'd be, okay, I'm going to fall in love with this new you guy. I don't know quite how she managed that, but that was something she had, like your parents had resolved about. We're not gonna go anywhere with these rumors, this bad stuff, till we find out what's really going on. I think my mom just decided we're gonna change over the course of our lives, but I'm gonna keep finding a way to love who you become.
Yeah. And for me, I've always looked, for example, at these programs and I develop relationships with a guest, like such as yourself. Uh, it is like opening up a Christmas present because I get to go into your world if I can shut up long enough to listen.
Doing a fine job here.
Well, I appreciate that. Um, do you find that if we would take that perspective, that a whole new world, all right, so it's not Disneyland or Six Flags or Epcot Center in Florida or whatever, but it's still an exciting an opportunity to find out about something and someone new.
Oh, I think so.
Even as your mother was it, you said, I'm going to fall in love with the new you.
Mhm. I definitely think so. I mean, to say you want things not to change is that's an absurdity. Of course they're going to change. You're going to change. The person you love is going to change. Your circumstances, your financial circumstances, your geographic circumstances. You have kids, you don't have kids. The only constant is change. So you better not be hoping for that because you're not going to get it.
Yeah. We are talking today about something better. We're always looking for something better because, quite honestly, there's always some room for improvement. But we're talking more importantly about Diane Parrish's book, Something Better. It is a novel that you can find at Amazon.com. She has a website also. It is Diane Parrish, Parrish with two R's.com. DianeParrish.com will be linked to it. And you can find out more about her and the work that she does. And you've written a bunch of other articles and things of this nature as well that they can find out about on your website. As we continue here on Tell Me Your Story, I'm Richard Dugan, and I want to thank you, Diane, for giving us so much time to delve into this particular aspect of the dynamics of relationships. It's
Mhm.
extraordinary. It's exciting. It can be frustrating, yes, but we're here for such a short time. And I'd have to say that, and I think about this often with the passing of my father 2 years ago, March 1st, actually, when I was told his last words to my mother. And he told her, he said, "I love you with my whole life,"
Oh gosh, that is amazing.
which I thought, but I mean, this is, but you're on your way out. And yet he maybe on the physical level, but he's still there. I still get impressions from him. I know,
100%.
you know, uh, so that's one of the perspectives I'd like to take for all of us. I had a dear friend who sadly on January 11th of 25, he had been diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver, but he had told another one of our friends, our mutual friends, that if he ever was diagnosed with something like that, something terminal that would, just be excruciating in the process, he'd take himself out, and he did.
Oh my gosh.
Well, that was when I had to grapple with my book, Choices, 5 Steps for Life. And it starts out by asking my present wife the question when she went through her cancer treatment in 2001, do you want to live or do you want to die? I may not like your choice, but I'll support you in it. And it took me a few days to reach that point of saying, okay, Mike, you were not willing to go through that on the physical level. I understand that. And I do support you in that. I may not like it because I'm going to miss talking with you and hearing your voice, but I support you in the choice that you made. And I know that's a hard one for a lot of people to comprehend, but the reality is, what good does it do for me to hold on to, how dare you, da 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 da, be angry and frustrated and so forth? I'll still grieve, but that's why I say at the end of these programs now, Mike, thanks for letting me be in your life.
Oh well. Yeah.
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 And for being in mine. We had so much fun together, producing all kinds of great stuff and talking on the phone. And he visited us once shortly after we moved to Santa Barbara. It was a wonderful friendship. I will cherish it, to say the very least, as much as my best friend of 53 years. We went through high school, grade school, high school, and college together. And that friend his name is Doug. And I have not shed a tear because every time I think about him, I start laughing because of, again, how much fun we had. So, and with my father, the night before his passing, we were on the video phone and we were chatting. And the beautiful thing I can honestly say is there were no words left unsaid.
Oh, that's wonderful.
You know?
Yeah. That's a
Yeah.
blessing.
Mhm. Susan, thank you. Susan. Who is Susan? Diane Parrish. Thank you so much. That's her sister. No, I don't know. Diane
My
Parrish is,
sister-in-law. My sister-in-law, Susan.
you just never know. Something Better is the title of the book, and we hope you'll go to dianeparish.com. I do have 3 final questions I will ask you, as I ask all of my guests at the end of these programs. But first, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We're here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and get this, folks, Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. That's 9 programs, 9 opportunities to hear 9 different conversations. And we hope that you will, with 9 different guests. And you can go to SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations to listen to on demand of Tell Me Your Story with Richard Dugan, or go to YouTube. We have a YouTube channel where you can watch these conversations, and I hope that you will. I hope you'll subscribe. I'm not looking at increasing necessarily my follower or subscriber numbers as much as I want more people to listen to these conversations. They're important. I wouldn't be doing them if they weren't. And I hope that you will share and click notification as well. So when I post a new program, a new podcast or video cast, that you'll be notified and you can then tune into it. Also remind you that Choices, 5 Steps for Life is now available on Amazon in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle. Audiobook is coming. It's just taking a little longer than I thought, but it is coming, folks. I also want to remind you that if you'd like to support the work that we are doing, you'd like to be a part of making something better in this world. We hope that you will. We have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And we also have a Venmo account. And the link there is at FFACSB, Frank Albert Charles Santa Barbara. That's at ffacsb.com. If you forget the .com part, it's anyway. So I hope you'll check that out as well. One final thing, folks. I hope you'll take time during the decade of perfect vision, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still small voice. I do. I get those impressions from my father that way as well. So I hope that you'll go there and tap into that resource that's there exclusively and especially for you. So, with all of that being said, we're going to ask of our special guest here on the program the first of three questions. Who is Diane Parrish?
Who is Diane Parrish? Well, until very recently, I would not have said this. I'm a writer, I'm a friend, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a grandmother, I'm an optimist, I'm a believer, I'm a happy person.
What gets you up in the morning?
The sun shining in my window.
And finally, what was your best day?
Oh my goodness. Oh, do I have to just pick one?
Whatever comes.
My best days were, of course, the banner headline days. The day I got married, the day I had my two children, the day my two children got married, and then the days they had their grandchildren. Those are my best days. Oh, and the day my book launched, that was a pretty great day too.
Oh, yeah, don't want to forget that birth.
No, another birth. Yep.
Absolutely. Well, Diane, thank you once again for joining us here on the program. We look forward to having you back again to talk more about this subject and hope that people will pick up a copy of Something Better through Amazon. And we look forward to talking with you again.
Thank you so much, Richard. It was wonderful to talk with you. Really great conversation.
And thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. Until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to love. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Mike, thanks for being in my life. Doug, I will see you on the other side. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.